Last time, I told you about a dead man's hand fused inside a clock mechanism, a repair that took 300 years to finish, and a whisper that sounded like relief. I told you the case was closed. I lied. Not on purpose. I genuinely thought it was closed. I packed up the gear, I called it a night, and then, alone, at 5 in the morning, with every other piece of equipment in that lab sitting dead and dormant, one single meter spiked. Not near the clock. The clock was silent. Spent. Actually, finally, dead. It spiked next to a lock of human hair that had been sealed in a hidden compartment since 1689. So tonight, we're not investigating a haunted object anymore. We're investigating a haunted bloodline. And I need to warn you up front. The science on this one is real. Not real in the fun, spooky podcast logic way I usually mean it. Real in the published, peer-reviewed, want-some biology way, and that is so much worse. Welcome back to the Phantom Navigator. Go lock your front door. I'll wait. Quick version: Bartholomew Finch, master horologist, dies in 1689, mid-repair on a long-case clock, hand fused into the gears. Clock proceeds to defy physics for 300 years, ticking with no power source, screaming at frequencies that match human vocal cords, dropping the room temperature like it's stealing heat directly out of the air. We dismantle it. We break the weld. Something leaves. It whispers, finally, case closed. Except we find a hidden compartment in the base of the clock. Inside, mercury vials, a stack of increasingly deranged vellum journal pages, and a locket containing a braid of silver hair belonging to Margaret Finch, his wife, dead of plague 6 years before he ever built the thing. His own journal tells us what he was actually building, not an eternal clock, a resurrection machine. If she is to wake, the heartbeat must not falter. And then the meter spikes next to her hair, hours after the clock itself went completely, permanently silent. Let's find out why. Here's a fact I need you to sit with because I promise it's going somewhere horrifying. Your cells glow, not metaphorically. Every living cell in your body right now, as you listen to this, is emitting an extremely faint scream of photons, actual particles of light from your DNA. Scientists call this biophoton emission or ultra-weak photon emission. If you want the boring version, it's been measured. It's not controversial. It's just too dim for your eyes to register the same way you can't see infrared, even though it's technically light too. Under normal circumstances, this glow is basically a whisper, background noise from your metabolism doing metabolism things. But here's a part that should concern you. Recent quantum biology research suggests these emissions aren't just a random waste light. They show a generally high degree of optical coherence, meaning your DNA behaves less like a flickering candle and more like a laser, an extremely weak biological laser, but a laser. Now imagine a human body under the single most extreme form of metabolic stress there is. Dying, terminal panic. the body doesn't gently power down. It goes into total cellular overdrive trying to survive, and that overdrive appears to trigger a massive, coherent burst of biophotonic activity, a scream of light, essentially, released at the exact moment of death. If that scream of light happens in a completely ordinary room, it just disperses. Nothing to catch it. But if it happens near a material with the right crystalline structure, quartz, certain granites, or say a locket made of silver holding a braid of hair that itself contains trace mineral deposits, that light can, theoretically, be absorbed and structurally recorded. Not metaphor, physical, optical, photo-etched information. The same base principle labs are now using to store 360 terabytes of data on a quartz disk the size of a coin, stable for literally billions of years. Margaret Finch didn't just leave a lock of hair behind when she died of plague. She may have left a recording. Okay, so let's say I'm right and something got recorded in that locket in 1683. That still doesn't explain why a meteor spiked next to it in 2026 alone in an empty lab at 5 in the morning with nobody touching it. Here's where it gets personal, literally. This is where it gets into your DNA specifically, not hers. Trauma doesn't just live in memory, it changes how genes are expressed through a process called epigenetics, methylation. Small chemical tags attach to your DNA that don't write the code itself, but change which part gets read. And these tags can be inherited, passed down. Your great-great-great-grandmother, worst night on Earth, can leave a chemical fingerprint that's still sitting quietly in your genome right now, waiting. Waiting for what, you ask? Great question. Here's the second half of the puzzle. Deep inside the human brain, we have microscopic crystals of a mineral called biogenetic magnetite. It's the same basic material some migratory animals use to navigate using the Earth's magnetic field. Humans have it too, which means on some level, your nervous system is a compass, a very quiet one you never consciously felt working. So picture this. You inherit trauma tags, pass down a bloodline, dormant, doing nothing for generations. Then one day, you walk into a specific room, a room with a specific localized magnetic signature, because something crystalline in that room is holding a very old, very intense piece of recorded information. Your internal compass registers that signature. It matches, somehow, at a frequency your conscious mind has no access to. The trauma tag sitting dormant in your own DNA. And your brain does something it was never supposed to do outside a horror movie. It plays the memory. Not your memory, someone else's. Someone who came before you and never got to finish what they started. You think you're seeing a ghost. You are actually watching your own Bloodline's emergency backup file execute. Which brings us to the meter, spiking alone next to a 300-year-old braid of hair. Here's the detail I didn't tell you in part 1, because I wanted you to sit with the horror of Bartholomew Finch on its own terms first. When we trace the provenance of this clock? Who owned it? Who inherited it? Generation after generation of increasingly nervous collectors. The family line traces forward unbroken in a nearly unbroken chain of descent for 337 years. It's still going. There's still a living descendant of Bartholomew and Margaret Finch right now, alive, breathing, almost certainly with no idea of any of this exists. And if the theory holds, if Margaret's biophotonic scream really did get etched into that locket the night she died, and if Bartholomew really did spend the last months of his life trying to build a machine capable of playing it back, then the clock was never actually the point. The clock was never actually the point. The clock was the amplifier. The locket was the recording. And the entire 300-year mechanism, the screaming gears, the frozen room, the shadow in the steam, all of it might have just been an elaborate, horrifying way of waiting for the right magnetic key to walk through the door and finally hit play. We are, as of this recording, actively trying to locate that descendant, ethically, carefully, and with what I can only describe as genuinely uncomfortable amount of caution, because I do not know what happens if that person stands in the same room as that locket. Neither does anyone else. There's no precedent for this. I checked. All right. Before we close this out, I have to indulge myself for a minute, because once you start pulling on a thread like trauma gets recorded into crystal and passed down through bloodlines, you inevitably wander into the deep, unhinged corners of the internet where people have taken this idea and sprinted with it directions I did not authorize, but respect the commitment to. Here's a theory floating around fringe circles that ancient megalithic sites, Stonehenge, the pyramids, structures like that, aren't tombs or calendars at all, but a forgotten global network of exactly this kind of crystalline recording, deliberately built on top of tectonic fault lines, specifically because the constant geological pressure keeps the tape charged. Is it true? Almost certainly not. Do I think about it every single time I see documentary about Stonehenge now? Absolutely. Against my will. Forever. There's also a theory that the entire modern internet quietly died around 2016. And everything you interact with online now is an AI-generated simulation designed to keep the last real humans docile and confused. I bring this one up not because I believe it, but because if you ever doom scrolled for 4 hours and thought, none of this feels real, I want you to know you are not alone. And also that a symptom of Twitter, not a secret cabal. I mention these not because I think they are true. I mention them because every single one of these theories, no matter how unhinged, is chasing the exact same idea we just spent an hour proving has some legitimate scientific backbone, that information doesn't just vanish, that the universe holds onto things that somewhere, something always remembers. That should comfort you. It does not comfort me. So, did we free Bartholomew Finch or did we just relocate him? Here's my honest answer. And it's the least satisfying thing I'll ever say all episode. I don't know. The clock is silent. The mechanism is dead in every measured, measurable, boring, physics approved way. Mechanism can be dead. If you're looking for a tidy bow on this one, I can't give you one because the meter spiked next to that locket after the clock went quiet, and I have not slept properly since. What I do know is this: energy doesn't disappear, it transforms, it relocates. A man wound 300 years of grief into a mainspring, and when we finally broke that spring open, something left. Where it went is still an open question. What's still sitting in a silver locket, waiting for the right magnetically tagged descendant to walk through a door, is an open question too. Here's what I want you to take from this two-parter, and I mean this more sincerely than anything else I've said across either episode. The object your family keeps, the things nobody quite remembers the story behind, sitting in a drawer, a box, in the attic, your grandmother's jewelry you've never once asked about, are not just objects. Ask about them. Ask while there's still someone alive who remembers the story. Because the alternative is a 300-year silence and a locket that starts talking to strange meters at 5 in the morning. If these two episodes got under your skin, do me a favor, share part 1 and part 2 together, because half of the story generally doesn't land without the other half, and I refuse to let anyone walk away thinking this ends with a clock going quiet. It doesn't. Rate the show, follow the show, and if your family has an object like this one, I want you to hear about it before I have to go find it myself. I'm your host. This has been the Phantom Navigator. Somewhere out there right now, someone with the last name Finch is going about their normal Tuesday, whatever day it is, completely unaware that a 300-year-old machine built entirely out of grief has been waiting patiently, silently for them their whole life. I hope they never find out. I really do. Good night.